Well, hello, Facebook. Hello, YouTube. Welcome back. It's always nice to have you guys. We will be recording this for a podcast. Welcome, everyone, to Sacred Geometry Talk today. So, as you can see, it's snowing in Vancouver. So, I got the winter, the winter background available for you guys. There we are. Not perfect, but there you go. And today I have something very, very interesting. We're covering many of the different cultures that are using sacred geometry, where I've personally found sacred geometry, and all of the different places that sacred geometry comes from and all that. So without further ado, let's start. Sacred geometry, first of all, is it involves this sacred universal patterns used to design basic geometry, and it is often seen in architecture around the world and sacred art. Now, it's another term for algorithm or a matrix. It produces out of specific forms a repeated that is marvelous and beautiful and often mathematically correct and perfect, including the golden ratio. Now, these patterns are developed from the circle. So I'm going to demonstrate to you today how you can draw these forms. Not that you're going to be able to follow with me. I have the drawings already made because they require extreme precision, compasses, because you're making a circle every time. So I have to prepare those in advance. I can't do those as I'm talking to you guys, but I will show you how they are drawn and how out of a circle you can get shapes like triangle, square, pentagon, and all these other perfect symmetrical forms. One of the aspects that defines sacred geometry or sacred shapes is that usually the shape will have the same length on all of its sides. So, for example, a rectangle has two short sides and two long sides, which they're uneven and per se cannot be part of sacred geometry, as opposed to a triangle, an equilateral triangle. So all three sides are the same length, which also means that all the angles inside of the triangles are the same or equivalent. In the same way, a square's sides, all four sides are the same length, and all the angles inside the square are the same. Same thing goes for the other shapes that we'll discuss tonight. Now, it's considered a fundamental building of temples, churches, mosques, monoliths, and you can see these ratios, this presence of this mathematical perfection present in all of these buildings across the world. Oftentimes, places like altars, tabernacles, meeting place such as sacred groves or holy wells, there will be something represented in the nature surrounding these places that will make them such that you will see the equation of the sacred geometry behind these things. The sacred geometry may be understood something that is a mathematical language, so it can be understood anywhere around the world. And as you will see, this will tie in to what we've talked about in the previous weeks with numerology and these other people such as Leonardo da Vinci, Fibonacci, and Pythagoras. The reason why we group these talks together is because they're all related. And so they explain within themselves how everything is connected. And this is one of the things as a shamanic holistic healer I try to bring to the people and the world, is to let you guys know that all these things are connected. And therefore, because they are connected, you can gain a greater understanding of the world around you and how exactly one thing can influence another. Now, in nature, many of the forms related to sacred geometry are, in particular, the chamber inside of a knotless shell. The constant rate of growth of the shell is actually the spiral of the Fibonacci sequence. But this is also found in honeycombs, the perfect shape of honeycombs. You know, they're all shaped the same. Now, if you've never been around bees, you wouldn't notice. But if you ever bought candles made out of wax, they usually have this pattern in the wax that makes it the honeycomb and represents the beeswax. And it's because of the perfect hexagonal cells that they construct for their honey. The proof can also be found in pine cones, or if you're just looking at things just with the naked eye, it's maybe harder for you to see these patterns. Sometimes you have to get closer, maybe under a microscope or even a magnifying glass, to allow you to see these marvelous designs. Some of the inside of flowers, now these have been drawn, but some of the inside of a flower may look something like this. Now you can see, I don't own the rights to this image, but it's called the Third Eye Chakra, Sacred Geometry Mandala, by Marius Michael Georges. Michael Georges is amazing. He does amazing, if you're ever looking for in the images, all of the points are related. They're all drawn by lines. Everything is united. At the center of this one, if you can see, there's a star. There's a pentagram style stars. Each of the designs that he creates are called sacred geometry, representing different energies for the different chakras. Now, the idea behind the sacred geometry is that because it is perfect in nature and also related to the golden ratio and therefore to creation itself and to God as healing properties, because it restores energy inside of us or the room that it's illustrated in or through the jewelry that we wear. Like me, for example, I wear this symbol, which we'll see later, on my throat. The symbol is there to allow me to speak, to allow me to be inspired, but to allow me to reach and to find the proper words to talk to you. So I'm using this energy based on what the symbol means in order to relate this energy into my purpose. Now, Pythagoras, this great old Greek guy that was amazing with numbers, discovered that there's a ratio that is created in sacred geometry. He applied this ratio to music, and a lot of the symphonies, a lot of the musical, marvelous number of classical music often found the same ratio. Some people even go all the way to say that Mozart had discovered this ratio, although he was a child. I think that in this case, it was more divine inspiration than anything else. But this young man could produce amazing pieces of music, all in harmony. Now, this is what the sacred geometry represents. It's perfect harmony, the creation of something perfect. In the Chinese, because I like to bring in a lot of the different cultures in my talks to be very inclusive and to allow you to see that it's not just one person or one culture that discovered these things. Together, all over the world, we had awakening going on and people figuring these things out and applying them in different ways. For the Chinese people, they also discovered the tonal scale and allowed their instrument. The instrument was a guqing. I'm sorry for all the Chinese people out there, I don't pronounce it properly. But the instrument was thousands of years older than Pythagoras and reproduces the sounds of this perfect ratio. Pythagoras believed that the harmonic ratios gave music power to heal. And if we go all the way back to Atlantis and Lemuria, they also used frequency, therefore sound in music. Frequency is, depending on how high or how low it is, can create either music or light or something beyond what we can see, but still a resonance. And they were using these resonances to restore the person's body to a perfection that meant that the body was perfectly balanced and that everything was healed. Now, the sacred geometry can be based on the perfect shapes or shapes made from circle. Either way, because they are created from the circle, which is the most perfect shape in the universe, they are all therefore becoming perfect. But we will see that it's the abstraction of certain lines or the connection of certain dots that creates these shapes and allows us to discover the magic of how a circle becomes a square or a triangle. And it's interesting to think that, remember, when we talk about numerology, the church council decided that numerology was something that was more not in alliance with the church's belief. But most holy sites, including Western Church and Cathedral, are built on geometric shapes, meaning that have been attributed to these shapes to give it more power, to make the site more sacred. The people who build the churches often build the churches on older sites, already the sites that have been already determined to have more power and more energy. Divine. And it was easier to convince people to come to a church if it existed on the previous place where they would worship anyway. But oftentimes they adapted the building to the area. Now in Quebec, we have one round church, the one and only. And I would love to tell you where it is, but I forgot the name of the town, and I've been trying to look for it, and for some reason it's just now disappeared. I have an area that the church is in, but I can't remember exactly where it's at. But as soon as I find it, I'll make sure to let you guys know. So the meaning is often borrowed from Pythagorean's theory. And he was part of a secret society that he had created, sharing their mathematical beliefs, esoteric belief, and I would say not so much religious, because there was no religion involved, but more spiritual beliefs. In fact, in the 13th century, a Kabbalist group from France. So you have the Essenes that are from the time of Jesus, which lived in a desert and were very secluded from the rest of the people living around them. And the same kind of teaching were then becoming mystery schools. The reason why they were called mystery school, which is what Pythagorean had to become, the people studying Pythagorean, because most of his teachings were outlawed by the church. They had to hide, and therefore became mystery schools. The idea of the mystery is that not everybody was allowed. You had to be recommended. They had to trust that you wouldn't betray them to the church, because the consequences were sometimes death. But the Kabbalist group in France succeeded in true geometric interpretation in dividing, this is interesting, the entire Hebrew alphabet into an order using the seed of life. But at the same time, the Jewish faith is using the flower of life to draw the tree of life, which is the ladder of light to enlightenment. So all of these things are linked together when you can be open-minded and you're open to the idea that how these things can relate to each other. Now, the alphabet the links discovered by the Kabbalist group in France was very similar to what Rashi wrote in the commentaries in the Old Testament. So even though they weren't Hebrew, they were able, through this science of perfection and mathematical equations and the ability to reorganize knowledge into perfect geometry, made sense to more than one culture. Now, let's get started with the first shape. Well, the first shape is the circle. If you think of mandalas are round. In effect, you'll never have a square mandala unless you put a square around it. Everything is made of circle. So your first element is the circle. The circle joined together with another one becomes the Pisces Vesica Pisces. Okay, so it creates kind of a fish. Now, a lot of people say that this fish is the same fish used by the early Christian, representing the fish of the Christian faith, being Jesus. Which, if we go further back, which is really interesting, in astrology, Jesus came and it was the Piscean time, and yes, he was represented by a fish. He was also the fisher of man. And since the year 2000, we are now in Master Saint Germain's era, and he is the Aquarian, the balance, and also a water sign. But before Jesus, who was the leader? And we have to go with the Hebrew faith here. I'm sure there were leaders in other countries, but this one is explained so well. Moses was the one who put an end to the Taurus era. The Taurus era came from Abraham, and Moses was the next one. So each of them have an animal from the astrological sign associated to them, or an astrological sign associated to them. So therefore, now we're tying astrology with people and their role and what they represent. Now, the vesical Pisces is also being used in mathematics. And now, if you remember, we're going further back in for some of us, for elementary school, we're going to the place where, you had two groups, and some of these groups had things in common, and that's when they fit in the Vesian Pisces. But it's also, in a more spiritual sense, this is the mathematical translation for it, but in spiritual sense, it's the communion of the Trinity of God. It's the will and the wisdom communing together, creating the love, creating the Piscean Vesica, which is also represented by the Christ light, which Jesus represented in his embodiment of this Christ light. Next, we go into the seed of life. Now, the seed of life is a smaller version of the flower of life. It's the smaller part here, which makes sense, right? Because the seed grows into the flower. Now, the seed is made of 7 circles. It represents the 7 days of creation. It also was adopted by the early Christian as the meaning of growth and new beginning. How does this spiritually apply? The seed is beginning. The seed is growth. I use this symbol when I would like something to grow in energy. So either I can use it as a crystal grid, and I will put crystal on it. But you remember the energy behind the sacred geometry shape. It is new beginning. So if you're trying to get something to keep going, something to just grow more, it might not be the best energy to work with. This is when you start a new relationship, or when you begin a new project, or you want to start a new business, or you're starting something new and you want this to start, which is different than actually growing. It's more about taking root. It's about having strong foundations. So those energies is what the seed of life is about. Now, as the circles connect, we obtain the other shapes. Interestingly enough, the triangle is created from the Piscean. So it connects through the joining of the lines of the connecting dots created by the Vesica fish, or Pisces, I'm sorry. But this is what happens when you want to make a square. The square, remember, has 4 equal sides. And it's the creation of the circle based on the very center of their, you start with a point, you draw the circle. Out of this point comes the other half circles that are creating the points where the lines will join. After that, the circles are created. It's always the center of one circle is always based on the this direct line between the previous circle. So the circle A is in the center. Circle B starts at the top of the original circle. Circle B starts at the sides of the original circle. Circle C starts at the other side, and so forth and so on. And it creates then the perfect square. Now, it takes patience, it takes agility, and I honestly wouldn't know how to do this without a compass. But apparently there's a few people in the world who can draw a perfect circle. I'm not sure if they would be able to do that, though. This requires a constant ability to remain the same size of circle, which is what sacred geometry is built on. So let's take the first shape, the triangle. The triangle has 3 equal bases, 3 equal sides, and if it's a triangle, it's a 2-dimensional shape. However, if it's becoming a pyramid, the pyramid becomes a tetrahedron. The tetrahedron is the 3-sided pyramid. It represents the fire element, and it helps create balance between physical and spiritual energy. So for those of you who like to have little pyramids around, you'll notice it's extremely rare to find a 3-side pyramid. You often find a square base pyramid, but very rarely can you find a 3-base pyramid. If you do, takes the form of a crystal, that you make it out of cardboard, that it's made out of wood. It really doesn't matter. It's the fact that just by creating that shape, you're creating the frequency of this energy is there, and it would help find a balance of the physical and the spiritual. Now, it also corresponds to the plexus, solar plexus. The other shape that is considered sacred, and the triangle is a key in 3 of the different shapes of sacred geometry as far as geometric shapes go, and it's literally the pyramid, 3-base pyramid on top of each other, creating kind of a point on each side. The element of that shape, which is called the octahedron, is air. The octahedron, the double-sided pyramid, does that make sense? Double-sided, or the back-to-back pyramids, are representing self-reflection and links to the heart. So each of them will link to a different center of energy inside of you. I've been able to find something similar, but it has a square base. I've yet to find one with with a triangle-shaped base. So if any of you ever find one, please message me and tell me where I can get one. It's the center of love and compassion. So if you were to wear that as jewelry, or have that in your meditation space, or even carry that with you, it would carry this frequency of love and compassion with you. And because it's sacred geometry, is automatically attuned to your soul and your spirit. And so therefore, there's no need to connect it to anything. It will automatically connect itself by its purity and its perfection. Now, the last one is the icosahedron, and this one is the 3-dimensional figure made of triangles, but it forms a ball. So we go from the pyramid to the double-side pyramid to something that grows, and all the sides are made of triangles, but it creates kind of a ball. Now, this symbol encouraged the flow, creativity, expression, and also the freedom of expression, right? So if everything is flowing, everything's coming naturally, it will do so with your physical movement, but also with your voice, your words, your thoughts. A very, very, very powerful geometric symbol. I have one of those, and I usually bring it up when I'm teaching, interesting enough. And I like to show people what it looks like. And people are usually quite intrigued at seeing this shape because they never really paid attention to it before. Or, most people go for a ball and the ball is round. but they don't realize that there's something extremely similar that can be almost considered a ball, but the energy is very, very, very different. And during class, they're able to feel these different energies that these geometric figures are carrying with them at all times. Now, the element for this one is water. So now we've had the fire, we had the air, and we have the water already in those shapes. And we know that water, in essence, if you're sometimes confused, think of it, if this is the shape that allows everything to flow, therefore it's fluid, and therefore the element is water. Now, we go into the square. So the square has 4 equal sides. That's to have a square is a 2-dimensional image, meaning it's flat. However, if we are creating a form with it, it'll become a cube or an hexaedron, the more scientific name, mathematical name for the shape, but it's a cube. Now, this cube represents the energy of grounding and focus. I have cubes that are made of hematite, and I have cubes that are made of different grounding, very grounding crystals. They kind of double up in their energy and the effect that they have in the surrounding. Why is that? Because that's what the cube represents, and that's what the crystal emanates as it is. So by shaping the crystal into a particular shape that fits with its element or its symbol or its frequency and its energy, we are exponentially allowing this energy to grow and to emanate in the room that it's in. Now, the cube is the element of the earth, which makes sense. It's a grounding energy. And the structures in crystal and also like that the cubes I have, apatite, aquamarine, black, in essence, will be very, very grounding. Now, the 5 sides, the pentagon, and I've drawn it here for you. So you see that we have 3 major circles. We have created the Vesica Pisces. But now from there, we're growing our shape. We're going through the exterior, which allows us, and you can see it right there, the pentagon is right there. So I put in a little color to allow you to see how it pops. There's a lot of circles involved before you get the perfect pentagon. But once you got it, it's there. Now, the pentagon also, when you're joining all the corners of the pentagon, we're creating the pentagram. So that this symbol, unfortunately, been associated with witches, bad energy, voodoo, or devil worshippers, or whatever else, as sadly a big mistake. The energy of the pentagram is a pure energy related, descended from the pure sacred geometry of the pentagon. So the 5 points of the pentagram represents the 5 cents. For the early Christian, it actually represented the 5 wounds of Christ. Now, how did we go from the 5 wounds of Christ to the devil worship? I have no idea. Sometimes I'd like to be a little bird in a machine that travels through time and just sees how these things get created, because it makes no sense to me. But it has been created, and therefore we have to live with that now. The Da Vinci picture of the Vitruvian man, so that's the picture of the man like almost pentagram shape, is also based on the pentagon shape. It's also based on the pentagram shape, but it also is going to reach even more solids that we'll explore tonight. Leonardo da Vinci was amazing. He had an amazing mind and an ability to be able to put the same thing in 10 different perspectives into one drawing, and only through observation, through reflection, and through introspection can you find all the meaning behind everything he's done. And so the teaching behind Leonardo da Vinci is quite intriguing. Ania, I hope you heard this thing about witches. And so the element for the pentagon and pentagram is ether. Now, ether, or you can also call it now, if you want to relate it to science, quantum energy. It's energy that is infinitely small and yet everywhere. It's some people are you require huge telescopes, or not telescope, but microscopes to be able to see it. It can't be seen by the naked eye, but then again, neither is air. But when the wind is blowing, you don't need to physically see the wind. You know the wind is there. In the same sense, this energy is there. This ether, it surrounds us. It's all around us. It's part of everything. The difference is that we're animated by soul, as opposed to your desk or your chair or your wall is not. Now, the shape of the pentagon, or if it actually makes a soccer ball. Now, if you ever paid attention, and for those of you who play soccer, who are soccer moms, you will notice that the soccer ball is made of pentagons sewn together, forming a ball. Now, this shape is called a dodecahedron. And it's the ability to go beyond the physical body to reconnect to a higher resonance or your higher self. And so this shape, it makes a beautiful, beautiful little pendant if you wear it as a necklace, or depending on how small it is, it could be also a charm on a bracelet. But it's very, very powerful energy. And again, I have this shape, and I do get it out when I teach classes. So people can actually hold them. And usually, it's like, okay, give it back now. It's time for it to go back into the box. And people are so drawn to this shape, they are marveled by the fact that pentagon put together can create a circle or a sphere, almost perfect sphere. It corresponds to the higher chakras, the third eye, the crown, and the connection to the higher self. It's not a natural occurrence in crystal, as opposed to the others can naturally occur without us having to grind them or force them into a position. Then we go into the hexagon. Well, the hexagon in the US, it's an hexagon, equal sides. So as long as you can make a shape that has all equal sizes, and it can be drawn on the circles in its perfectness, the beauty of it that comes together, then you have sacred geometry, at least the simple form of it. Now, there it is. I did draw the seed of life. So the seed of life is the beginning of the flower of life, much smaller. The elements of it includes the new beginning, like we discussed before. Now, this beautiful flower of life here, this shape, especially nice this big, can be used to do crystal grids. When you're using the flower of life, you're now bringing expansion to what you already created with the seed of life. Now, in my personal experience, I have discovered this shape in Egypt when I was there in 2016. We were visiting the temple of Abydos, and I'm very curious. And to tell you the truth, I was getting bored of seeing the same temples over and over and over again, because they're all, after a while, look very similar. But Abydos is special. Abydos is holding drawings of helicopters and submarines and things that no other temples have. And I got drawn outside, as I usually am, being carried by a different wave than everybody else. And when I got outside, I found remember what I said, that they built the church on top of an ancient temple? It's not just like the Christian that did this. It's anybody that could build on top of something. It was easier to just use the energy that's already there, that someone else that was better than us found this energy in the first place. And Abydos is such a temple. The age of the first temple at the bottom is very, very old. And I mean, we can do the carbon data. However, the other thing that tells us it's extremely old is the type of rock being used to build is completely different than the top temple. And also the size of the stones being used to build the underlayer temple of Abydos is like 30 or 40 tons each or more. It's insane. They're one big pieces, monoliths, and perfectly squared and rectangled and built on top of each other. And on those pillars is engraved over and over and over the flower of life, which means the Egyptians have been using this symbol for at least 5,000 to 6,000 years, if not more. It's also a symbol that is contained in different sites all over the world. But this is the one that I personally witnessed, which was pretty cool. In modern, the modern use for it is often being used now for grids. But people misunderstand that just the image of the flower of life put under your chair, or put under a place where you sleep, or under, if you do Reiki, if you put under your table, the sacred geometry will activate energies and work with you to enhance the perfect vibration of perfect energy. Now, the flower of life, out of that, you can draw the other symbols, which are Metatron's cube, or the other platonic solids, as they're called, which we'll explore in a minute. So therefore, based on the fact that it's been found in temple all over the world, it's been attributed the value of fundamental space and time, a very the visual expression of the convection that weaves everything and everyone together. Now, the symbol is found in the Forbidden City in Beijing, in China, and in sacred sites in Israel, India, Spain, and Japan. And then, for them, or different, depending on where you're finding it, they have different meaning associated to it. One of the meaning would be that it embodies the life force energy. If you think of it, the flowers, it's composed of, oh my gosh, I think the latige, the leaves, but the beauty of it all, what contains all life, is the flower itself, not the rest of it. And that's what the flower of life represents. It's also the universe, how it's woven together, how everything is knitted together, how everything ties in together, which is what is so neat about finding all of the shape, the circle, obviously, the triangle, the square, the pentagon, all of the shapes are inside this flower of life. Everything can be found inside of it, depending on which line and which connection we're making to create the different shapes. Now, the seed of life, the one I showed you earlier, let me get that back. This one is the seed that grows into the flower of life, obviously. It's made with the basic 7 circles. So you have 1 circle here, you have 1 circle here, and the seed is only made of 7 circles. It helps you associate it to the 7 days of creation, the 7 chakras, the 7 musical notes. Its interlocking circles are said to be the very blueprint of the universe, because everything emanates from it. And also, if you're looking at it, depending on how you're coloring it, so I colored it a certain way for the purpose of a class, but if you start coloring the different circles, the 7 circles blended together, you will see also the different moon cycles, the waxing, the full, and the waning. In various goddess tradition, it's the ancient symbol that will depict the sacred trinity, or the all-seeing eye, the way that I paint the different circles. Now, the Star of David, which is the reason why the stop sign, the hexadron, was so important. This is your regular stop sign, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sides. But if you link the corner of these angles together, it creates the star made of an upside down and an upside triangle. So therefore, the Star of David is also sacred geometry, because it's drawn from the actual 6-sided shape. Now, this shape is also, there it is. This is the complete seed of life with all the 7 circles. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 creates the seed from which the flower will grow. But again, now if you're coloring it differently, you can find the different shape of the moon, you can find the eye, you can find all the different shapes. Now, out of this shape of the tetrahedron, what we can get, because it's also built from circles, right? Everything is from circles. So the central circle with circles around it, and again, growing the circles on the outside. If we're, instead of drawing all the circles, if we're only connecting the center of these circles, then we find our six-sided shape. We find our Star of David, and we find a smaller version here. It keeps growing, right? So if we keep drawing the circle, we will keep finding these shapes growing within another, representing the growth from the seed to the flower of life. Now, this here is also what's been used by Leonardo da Vinci. And in here, you can actually fit the Fibonacci sequence. It's 2 Fibonacci sequence back to back. This shape, if you put in a 3-dimensional shape, is also called a Merkaba. The Merkaba is the Jewish name for this symbol in its 3 dimension. The Merkaba is, now you're taking the Star of David, right? So it's a pyramid in 3-dimensional shape. The triangle becomes a pyramid pointing up and the other one pointing down. And so these 2 pyramids are now intertwined to the energy is pointing to the earth. The one pointing downwards is drawing energy from the earth. And the Merkaba itself becomes a vehicle of light that draws the energy from both ends. The Mer means light, the Ka means spirit, and the Ba means the body. So the Merkaba is the unification of light from spirit to body, all into one place. The Merkaba is easy to find in a lot of stores. Like, you can have little small ones. Again, the shape doesn't matter. As long as the shape is well created and respects the proportion a Merkaba should have, which is the Metatron's cube, the energy will vibrate into your home. You can, if you don't have a lot of money, you can make these shapes out of straw or straws. You know, the drinking straws, they're great to create these shapes. And you can put these shapes and hang them in your house. People will think, you know, oh, cool, decorating with the kids or something. And yet, this energy is very, very powerful in its purity and in what it's going to provide you, not just for you, but the entire environment. The other name for the Merkaba is called Metatron's cube. This is the design here that I have on my trove. I have it in a 2-dimensional design. Now, Metatron is the archangel of God that takes down messages. He's a messenger of type that he travels from the heavens to earth. Again, we have this link of things coming from the heaven and things coming to earth and being delivered to someone. He's an archangel from Judaism, but he also exists in Christianity and is equivalent as another name in other religions or other cultures, but has always been the messenger. Now, this image is composed of 13 circles. Now, we were talking about the seed of life is composed of 7, and Metatron's cube has 13. They're all arranged in a roundabout way to create the hexagonal symmetry, as I showed you. Now, Metatron is attributed through this sacred geometry. He was assigned to this particular shape because he represents mysteries and inner workings of the universe. You know, he's the body of God. He knows everything, and he has the ability to come and show us a few things if we're first of all asking for help and requiring guidance, and we're open to receiving the messages. It symbolized the creation of life itself. As I said, you know, there's the smaller, then there's the Star of David, then it's growing. It represents growth, exponentially expanding. It is also, because in this shape, you can find all the other shape, it represents all the elements. And so it is said that this particular shape has profound healing powers. I have an artist friend that made this one for me, which again, the lines are there. So we have the upside triangle, the downside triangle, based around this 13 circles, creating this shape. Now, this artist, if you're interested, she now does sacred geometry art. Her name is Victoria Beaumont. And if you ever want to know more about her, you can just leave something in the comments and I'll put her contact information or website or Instagram so you guys can see all the other types of geometry that she does work with. This is another way of describing, depicting this star, but this in this fashion, they're focusing on the energy of the triangles and how more triangles within triangles are creating more triangles and are working together. See, this one's under this one, but this one's under this one, this one's under this one. And so they're all interlaced together and they're all working into creating this cosmic energy of creation. The tree of life. Now, the tree of life is very, very interesting, and it's the basic for Kabbalah. The Kabbalah is built on the tree of life. The tree of life in the Kabbalah is actually one tying into the next, to the next, to the next, creating the ladder of life, or the ladder of Jacob. It's the growth of human consciousness and the human soul into enlightenment and being more and more connected to God. It's included in Judaism and Buddhism as well. I don't know exactly how the Buddhism use it, but it is part of their designs that they are using to explain spiritual teachings. It also showed up in ancient Egypt over 3,000 years ago, which is not surprising because the Jewish people had a lot of interaction with Egypt. Now, which one came first, I wouldn't know. But the ancient Egypt had a lot of mystery school and a lot of mystery teaching. So I wouldn't be surprised if they had the same teaching. Now, it's a question of, is it the egg or the chicken that came first? At this point, it's not really important. What is important is that multicultural countries all over the world are all using this particular geometry to explain levels of consciousness, enlightenment, and reaching a connection to God. Now, even more interesting, in this day and age, the National Mall in Washington, D.C. is actually based on the sacred geometry of the Tree of Life. It's constructed in the same exact shape. Now, Kabbalah is something that I will discuss entirely on its own, because the awakening of consciousness and the growth of human awareness and the connection to God and our higher self is something that I want to explore, but just not right now. So if you have any questions, you can bring those when I do this talk. And so out of these shapes, we can also extrapolate different shapes, which are called the egg of life. So much like the seed, as far as I'm concerned, they're very, very similar. Much like the seed, the egg of life represents a beginning, a growth. Just like the seed hasn't really cracked open and sprouted yet and built roots. Or the fruit of life. The fruit of life is basically the 13 circles composing Metatron's cube, but without all the lines. And so that's what they refer to as the fruit of life. All right. Now, a nice book that you might be interested in getting, and that I based some of my talk on today, is The Ancient Secret of the Flower of Life, Volume 1 and 2, from Drunvalo Melchizedek. He amazingly, what was cool for me when I was looking through this book was that he does explain all the connection with the Vitruvian man, but he has the pictures of the places where I did in Egypt find the flower of life engraved in the Temple of Abydos, and other very interesting connections that are made through all the temples of Egypt. But he's mostly focused on Egypt. I like to go a little deeper into finding different other cultures that relate to the same topic. If it's only about If it's only in one place, I find that too specific. But sacred geometry is all over the world. So now, to build the let's say crystal grid. Okay. Now we will have a talk on crystals, so no fear. However, this is the basic of how you build a crystal grid. At the center of the grid, you will need a shape that represents where the energy accumulates. Now, it's not a thing about size because it's got to fit inside the grid, but it's a thing about energy. It's a receptacle of energy. It's something that can amplify energy. I have little spheres that I use. I have little obelisks that I use. I have pyramids that I use. But I also have, it's a small collection of small crystals. It's like a family. And they are amazing at collecting the energy from all the other crystal and building something. Now, when you're building a crystal grid, you want to be able to give it an intention behind it. What is this grid going to do? Where is this energy going to go? What are you going to do with what you're building? Like everything else, you have free will, first of all. So therefore, no one's going to interfere in what you're doing. So if you're not doing it right, it's just not going to do anything. It's not going to damage anything. It's not going to hurt anyone. But unfortunately, it's, waste of time. Second of all, you have to give it a purpose. So what's the purpose behind the crystal grid? The crystal grid, for example, will be one for healing, one for forgiveness, one for abundance, one for more money, one for inspiration. It could be anything. You're building the grid and you're choosing the crystals you're choosing. Now you want to choose the crystals that will magnify this energy, right? So you want to work with an energy that makes sense. So for example, if you want more love, you can choose rose quartz. If you want more money, you could go with aventurine or jade. If you want more grounding, then you will pick carnelian. Carnelian is also good with money. So some of the stones have more than one meaning or facility. So you're using those to put around the grid, but at the center, it could be anything you want. But yeah, you'll know from choosing a crystal which one is more powerful than another. And then you put the center piece here, but at the junctions of all the other lines is where you will put your 6 other crystals. Now you can do here and also here. So this will be a 12 crystal grid. Generally, you can use rounded off for tumbled stones. So they're just don't have a particular angle to them. If they do, however, have points, I would point all the points throughout the center because you want to concentrate the energy in the center where your intent is either written or put in there. So let's say my intent is to be inspired into creating this new painting. I will put the stones around it to accelerate the energy and for this energy to be delivered to me. So I will specify this energy is for me, not for a client, not for a neighbor, not for a friend, or not for a family member. You could do one for your children, saying to enhance their mental ability before they have an important exam. Those are different examples to use these energies in order to build what you need more in your life to be supported by extra energy. And then you will charge the grid with this energy, and the energy will be delivered to you as consistently as you allow energy to go in it. For those of you who have Reiki, you know how to do that. For those of you who don't, it's spending time in front of the grid in full intent of allowing the grid to do this. So repeating your intent, an increased flow of energy to be inspired for my new painting, an increased flow of energy. And you spend this time and energy and concentration and focus in making sure that the grid understands what it's working for. And then it will deliver this energy 24 hours during the day and at night. So you might wake up feeling inspired. You might all of a sudden see something and the inspiration will kick in. Now, the other use for sacred geometry, if you do any type of healing, if you work with anybody, if you have an office where people come in and out of your office, pick the shape that you always before choosing the shape, what do you want, right? But the most powerful shape is the Metatron's cube. So you could have the drawing under your laptop. You could have it under your healing table. If you're a massage therapist, it would be amazing to put it under your table. So nobody needs to know or even see the symbol. Only your awareness to know that the symbol is present in the room, in this table, focusing its energy on the person laying on the table will be effective and prove to be quite, uh, I would also almost say miraculous in the properties of healing the person receiving the treatment. The people will notice a difference in the treatment and the sessions that you're giving them. So I would encourage you to try it. Ask, obviously ask for feedback. There's another shape that the seed of life, for example. If you're trying to do something new, if you're trying to get a new project going, you want to have, I don't know, a new vehicle or a new job or a new relationship, you can put the energy of this on your person. You need to carry this energy with you. I mean, I took a shortcut. I got it tattooed, and there it is. It's there for all time, and I'm good to go. But I have jewelry, sacred geometry jewelry. I have rings. I have necklaces. Those can easily be found in stores all over the place, if not online. I encourage local artists and that type of thing, but feel free to buy whatever you want. And again, as a decorative object, it has to be placed in an area where the energy won't just lay latent there. So let's say, for example, you make yourself Metatron's cube out of straws, makes a beautiful shape, and you put it in the top corner where nobody walks by, where nobody goes near this shape. The energy there is going to be fantastic, but if nobody goes there. Now, on the other hand, if, for example, you were to put it where you're sitting while you're working in your office, if you're lucky like me and you work in an office in your home, nobody's going to ask any question. Nobody's ever going to see it. You never see what's above my head. And yet I have the potential of using all this energy all the time that I'm sitting in this very spot. So all of those energies are practical and can be put to use in your everyday life. So now, sacred geometry in a way is simple. It's got its basic shapes. Even if you query, if some of you want to see the shapes, especially for those on podcasts who can't see nothing, you go on Google and you just type sacred geometry, and you most likely will see, or the divine elements of sacred geometry, and you will see all the shapes being drawn for you and explain how to make them or the final product. It's not very complicated, but it's a very important subject because it ties into the numbers, it ties into Pythagoras, it ties into Leonardo da Vinci, it ties into Fibonacci, it ties into all these men that have discovered these weird links between everything and the connection of everything. Ignoring sacred geometry would be like ignoring the fact that I have two eyes in the middle of my face. But it's not complicated. So I don't know what else I could say. So I'm just wondering if you have any questions, anyone. And then I can answer the questions and see where to go from there. Anybody? I know people are watching. I have people here, but everybody's quiet. All right, then. So if you have any other questions, of course, I can be contacted through my website, www.sonya.com. You can use the contact form. You can just email me. If you're watching from Facebook, you can just put comment below this video, especially if you're watching after the video went live. I'm always watching. I'm always keeping track of all the comments, and it's always a pleasure to answer, to you guys show an interest in what I do, and I am always happy to answer. until you guys all understand everything. And there's no stupid question. If you don't get something, someone else is probably not really getting it. And so it's always worth it to keep asking those questions and getting the right answers. So that's it for tonight then. And by the way, the new Reiki books are almost finished. They'll be coming your way, be available in Amazon very shortly. So those of you who are already teaching Reiki or planning to start teaching Reiki, you will have books available for you to give to your students. Yay! Moment of celebration for me. So thank you, everyone. And you have a good evening. And take care.